Heavenly Father, I hold in my hands a precious little gift of life that you have entrusted this man and this woman that have been brought together to serve a purpose in this world. They know you, Lord. You're the one, Lord, that created this little gift. We dedicate it to you, Lord, that they will do their utmost to bring it up in the ways of the Lord. Protect it in health, Lord. Watch over Daddy and Mother. Bless the home. Whatever time there remains, may you be glorified in this. We thank you now in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Well, I got a grin. Look at that. Sound asleep. Okay, who wants it down? Now, looking at the chart, which we've had up here several times in the recent 3 years, we're going to be specializing mainly today on this black line and this blue line. This is drawn out in a large scale because it shows all the things that's to take place relatively within the week of Daniel, which starts here and ends right here. The millennium is over here. Now, we're living right in here. We don't know. We have an idea what time remains between now and the starting of the week of Daniel. There's something went on this week that really steered my attention to the looking at something other. And Jim misunderstood my word here. It's actually showdown at sundown. I take that actually from an old Western story that I read one time, which was supposed to be true. A lot of these stories are true in their origin, but time has added a lot of tradition to them. But brothers and sisters, I would like for you to take a look at yourself this morning. Why are you here? Why aren't you just sitting somewhere else in some nominal church of your choice? Why didn't you go just to hear some preacher go on about a 30-minute speech and hear 2 or 3 songs, short sermon, service is dismissed, you're on your way home to that roast in the oven. You spend the rest of the afternoon in a boat running around, ripping the waves, and another day has passed and you've learnt nothing. The world rocks on. When the sun goes down this evening, I want you to know in the world at large that you live in, there's going to be a lot of sad people crying. I'm going to tell this story just to give you a setting. Had there not been men like White Earp, Buffalo Bill, and that type that you heard about, living back in the 1800s, some before the Civil War period, some after, leading up to the 20th century, had there not been men like that, of that caliber, some of them towns and communities that are well known in that era of time, life could have been very miserable. A lot of innocent people were killed, all because many times 2 or 3 crooked men wanted to control everything in the town or the community itself. But my story begins in a cow town in West Texas. It was where the railheads ended. In early October, in that particular year, trail herds was arriving in the vicinity of this town. Because here's where the trains would come. From Texas, New Mexico, all through the west, giant herds of cattle was being brought. As these herds would arrive in the various areas of the landscape around this town, sometimes these herds would have to be herded and kept pretty well corralled in a smaller area until the cattle buyers would arrive. The story goes on that there was two brothers, Ben and Bill Johnson. They were drunkards, they were gamblers, they were crooks. They enjoyed making life miserable for everybody in this small town. It was late in the evening. A lot of the cowhands of these trail herds was dismissed to come into town and get drunk. The story is that there was about 500 cowhands just looking for something to drink, looking for excitement. And they were all visiting the various saloons, getting drunk. And there was an old man that was a sheriff. He was sitting on the boardwalk, propped against the front of a store. And there was a saloon next door. When out of the door came one of these Johnson brothers. And the old man was propped back against the wall on his chair, sound asleep. This particular Johnson man, he just up and shot him, killed him right there. That was the beginning of the excitement that began to take place late in the evening. There was a man rode into town, nobody knew him. He had just got into town and signed in at the hotel. As he went up to his room, he had full view of the street. And for a long time he had sat and watched out the window the display of this drunkenness, this nonsense, uncontrollable. He knew how that the sheriff had got shot. Everybody else was scared to do anything or say anything. All night long, shots in the air. Drunk fellows riding the horses up and down town having a good time. Everybody that did stick his head out around the corner, they took a shot at him. By the time the sun was coming up the next morning, the town hadn't had much sleep, and the citizenry hadn't had much rest. This stranger that had came in the evening before, he came downstairs. And in the lobby of the hotel, the mayor of the town was talking to the proprietor, discussing what a predicament they was in. The stranger just stood by the sideline and listened to the conversation. Out in the street, the crowd was getting bigger now. And the main one of the Johnson brothers, I believe his name was Ben Johnson. They could hear his voice out there cursing, challenged the town to all kinds of this and that. This man that was in this hotel, overhearing this mayor and so forth, his name was Wyatt Earp. He was the man that was involved in the Old Cave Corral shooting, him and his brothers. He walked over to the mayor and said to the mayor, "Why don't somebody go out there and arrest that guy?" The mayor said, "Who do you think you are?" And he looked at him. And the stranger said, "I'm Wyatt Earp." That brought an expression of interest across his face. "Well, what would you do?" He says, "I have no gun." The mayor said, "Would you arrest him if I made you sheriff?" He said, "I'd either arrest him or kill him one." He pinned a pinned a star on his white shirt and said, "Come and go with me." He took him out the back of the hotel, back behind a mercantile store, and came in the back way. And there was a display case of all kinds of revolvers. Wyatt Earp looked down and said, "Let me see that one." The proprietor handed it to him. He picked it up and felt of it. He says, "Let me have a holster." The mayor paid for the gun. He went right back out the same way out of the mercantile store, come in the back door of the hotel, come into the lobby, and a man had on a white shirt, and the sun is coming up. Ben Johnson is standing in the middle of a big street, and the streets in those days was wide because herds of cattle come herded through town. Ben Johnson was out there cursing. He had a double-barreled shotgun. Wyatt Earp looked out the window and seen what position the man was standing in before he stepped into the doorway. When he stepped into the doorway, he said, "Ben Johnson, I'm coming out to get you." Ben Johnson let out an oath. By that time, Wyatt Earp was already in the street in a slow walk, walking right towards Ben Johnson. By the time he gets into the middle of the street, Ben Johnson says, "Who in the blankety blank, who are you?" And Wyatt Earp said, "I'm Wyatt Earp." And Ben Johnson said, "Look, I don't want no trouble with you." Wyatt just kept walking, says, "Then lay your gun down." As Wyatt kept walking, finally, Ben Johnson, out of fear, dropped the shotgun. Wyatt Earp walked up to him and put handcuffs on him, led him right back in the hotel, and turned him over to the mayor, and they put him in jail. All the rest of the spectators who could have shot him, and some of them was still drunk, they dispersed and went back. The mayor says to Wyatt, says, "Weren't you afraid?" He said, "No." "Well, what was you looking at?" He said he was standing in a position that it would have been impossible for him to shot me without moving first his wrist and changing position he was standing in. If he'd have moved his wrist, I'd have shot him. Now, the moral of this thing is, that's a true story. That's a small thing in this day of our modern society and a modern world. But the town itself had some rest after that. That happened at sunrise. Wyatt Earp was a perfect target to wear a white shirt and a star facing a man with a double-barrel shotgun. But the man had some sense. He was brave enough to risk his life for the sake of others and a town community that had to remember this ordeal for many a year. Insomuch that all across the West, stories about men that brought peace. I'm looking at a crowd of people this morning. In a few short years, we're going to be involved in a showdown at Sundown. It's when man has been brought to the place
He's defiled mankind. He's done everything against mankind. He's defiled the earth. And all the world leaders are crooks, murderers, rapists of the highest caliber. They maneuvered everything in their favor. All over the world today, people, citizens, are trembling because of mere men in power that wants glory, and especially in this New World Order episode. I've read enough, brothers and sisters, it would almost make you want to pick up a shotgun and go after these crooks that for 50 long years they have slowly put this thing in motion. And the news media that we have that's supposed to tell you the news, they are liars. Every last one of them. If they're not liars, they're first-class cowards. Because they've sold out, brothers and sisters, to the overall political picture. Now, first off, let me say this morning, the New World Order is not a beast, but it is a system, and it's motivated by a spirit. The beast that the Bible speaks of, you read it in Revelations 13. That's the beast, brothers and sisters, that for the past 40-some years has been restored, built back into geographical potential. At the same time, this New World Order thing has also been being built and put together. Now, you cannot have two rivalries for the same world position. When we look in the Word of God, we're going to be able to see where we fit in, where we don't, what our part is, and what our part is not. So this is why I've called it this. When man has went through the week of Daniel, the raptures took place. The two prophets have come. In the middle of the week, the beast of Europe, the Antichrist ahead of that, he comes into Jerusalem. He kills the two prophets because he's going to show the world now who is really the powerfulest. And in the temple he's going to sit, and for 3.5 years, 42 months, he's going to sit in the Jewish temple, showing the world that he is God, to be worshipped as God. The New World Order, brothers and sisters, is a spirit. I want us to break it down, and let's analyze it. We have preached on 2 Thessalonians. We have preached on Daniel 7, verses 29, I believe it is, or 9:27, something like that. The Antichrist system. Let's take a look at it this morning. The Antichrist system is not the head of Sodom perversion. Now think seriously. Sodomite perversion is the outcome of demonic sellout to the devil, which has no religious orientation at all. Antichrist has certain, we will say, spiritual, religious affiliations. Keep in mind, you've got to know the framework of the old Roman Empire as it came under Catholicism. And in the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church did rule Europe. Think of the hundreds and thousands of people whose lives were affected by that. It took the Reformation, starting in 15 and 20, to wound that head that put it in we will say, a dormant state, while God began to restructure his church through the generations of time from that time on. And the New World was discovered. And the basis for true Christianity began to be established in the New World. It grew, it flourished. Out of the New World came a nation that became powerful enough that Europe had to recognize it. That's the lamb beast that you see also in Revelation 13. In its beginning, Europe never thought America would ever amount to much because it was a vast wilderness. But little did Europe realize that America one day, immigrants would keep coming here. And those that came here to get out from under the clutches of that old diabolical religious system called the Catholic Church in the political structures of Europe. But the sad part of it is, this lamb beast that had two horns like a lamb, somewhere in its latter days it began to speak like a dragon. It says also in the Revelations that this second beast, or this lamb beast, it had power to reconstruct, restore, give back to the healing of the first beast. When World War II came to a close, the first time in American history, vast sums of the wealth of the United States began to be channeled through aid programs of all sorts. God allowed Russia to rise up with communism as a threat and as a decoy. And brothers and sisters, for 40 years, this nation kept hundreds and thousands of troops on the European soil, an air force, a giant navy going between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean Sea. American tax dollars was constantly being channeled over there. Europe was gradually rebuilt. Her cities became modern because it was practically all devastated. There's hardly any of the scars of World War II left anymore on the European continent. My point is this. When we also read in Revelation 13 that this second beast was the cause of an image being made to the first beast, keep in mind, there's three things that you must understand from the biblical language. The first beast that you see restored in Revelation 13 is the reconstructing and realigning of the 10 horns of Western Europe. You've seen that gradually come about since the close of World War II. But then another part of that is how the Catholic Church figures back into this program. Because the satanic aim through the Antichrist agent is the Catholic Church must again be back in power for a short period of time in the European continent. We can see then, brothers and sisters, what began to take place. The recognition of the Catholic Church, where at one time it was practically dormant, just a figurehead of the Pope. All of a sudden, things began to awaken in the Vatican. Yes, this Protestant nation, under President Johnson, elected an envoy to be sent to the Vatican. It's the first time a Protestant nation ever recognized the Vatican for any kind of recognition at all. Then we begin to see there was a spirit rise. It was not in the political frames of Washington. It was in the religious sectors of Protestantism. the forum, or we will say the Constitution, that the United Churches of Christ, or the World Council of Churches of Christ, was all brought together in Holland. Right where, brothers and sisters, a lot of the pioneers set sail out of Europe to come to the New World. The charter was drawn up there by heads of church systems. No political head had anything to do with it. It was all church leaders. But then the time then they came to Wheaton, Illinois, here is where life was structured into it. It was money out of certain wealthy institutions here in America that gave the World Council of Churches the financial capabilities to begin to function in their role in the new in the world structure as it's been going on. Still, we don't hear the politicians saying anything about what the church is doing or anything. But then all of a sudden, about the time that this ecumenical spirit begins to rise and gallop, spreading its message for unification, that takes place along about 1964. Here comes this woman by the name of Madeleine O'Hara. She's not an Antichrist woman. She's an atheist. She don't believe in nothing. She sends out these sheets of paper to get petition signatures of a lot of people in America that don't want prayer in school, don't want Bible reading and such. So we can say the devil, through a woman that don't even believe in God nor nothing, was successful in getting the U.S. Supreme Court to knuckle down and take prayer out of the school. Now, the spirit that did not is not an Antichrist spirit. If it had been an Antichrist spirit, brothers and sisters, keep in mind, Antichrist is religious, but it means it is contrary to the true revelation and the purpose of Jesus Christ. You've got to see that in your thinking. No sooner does this spirit begin to hit our school systems. Yes, the World Council of Churches is already functioning in the other desolate, poverty-stricken regions of the world. They're carrying out their program. But we see taking place here in this nation. When they take prayer out of the school, you don't even mention God nor nothing. So you've got to see that's not Antichrist, that's anti-God. Amen. They don't even want you to talk about church, God, Jesus Christ, salvation or nothing. When they do that, that begins to strip from the conscience of the American society and leaves the minds of the people vulnerable to what the devil has in mind of doing. Sure, the Antichrist spirit is still right out there. And that's why we can say conditions that will transpire from here till the time the week does start, God will see to it that eventually it is the Pope of Rome that will be allowed by God to negotiate a peace treaty and a financial trade agreement with Israel. But keep in mind, within the structures of the political side of nations, you're still looking at this anti-God thing. So now then, we don't want to forget that thing. Because, brothers and sisters, at the coming of Jesus Christ, Revelations 19, 16, Armageddon here. But Revelation 19, 11, and 20 is the descent of Christ. When you read that scriptures carefully, Jesus Christ is coming to kill, to destroy the inhabitants of this earth who have absolutely sold their lives out to this atheistic, demonic spirit we've got in America. America has been the spreader of this diabolical spirit all over the world. Now, when you go back to the beast system and the Battle of Armageddon, that's not a war fought between Christ and earthly dwellers. That is a war fought between the Orient and the Western European nations for domination, superiority. You and I have nothing to do with the destruction of the Roman Catholic Church. Read your Bible. 17th chapter. What does it say? The 10 horns of Europe will destroy that woman that has rode through this wicked time. It says they will burn her flesh. So the Roman Catholic Church, that Antichrist spirit, will definitely be brought to an end by the political powers of Europe. Let's settle it. Where is the Antichrist at that time? He's no longer in Rome. He went there at this time to do what? What it says in Revelation 11. He went there to kill the 2 prophets. Didn't he? And to take over the holy city, Jerusalem, to tread it underfoot 42 months. Keep in mind, that Pope, when he said in Rome, at this time, what is the main attraction of that hour? It's the miracles that the 2 prophets smite the earth in the Middle East with plagues of every description. The man of sin cannot watch this day in and day out, evening in and evening out. He's literally going to see the power of God, how God uses those 2 prophets. Then, brothers and sisters, by the time has brought the man of sin to this point, here's where God allows the man of sin, supposed to be the Antichrist. He has preached Christ. He has upheld Christ and the Blessed Virgin Mary. He's upheld the church for its role in human lives and its relationship. So the devil is going to cause that man to begin to think an evil thought. By the time the middle of the week comes, he's going to begin to say, I'm going over there and show them people who is God. This is what leads us to Daniel, the 11th chapter, to read like it does. So when he goes over there with his NATO military force, just what they've used in Serbia. This is the beginning of your beast army. And it's a sad thing to say. We got a president that had to initiate it. NATO today is the product of what our political leaders strive for 50 years. If Clinton hadn't went, I have my doubts if NATO would even started a motor up. but at least it set the agenda. And I have to say, though they've stopped the bombing, this is not going to bring peace. It's merely brought a lull. But it's going to leave a lot of an atmosphere shaking. Because everything else in this world is beginning to tremble. So the point is this. When you read the 17th chapter of Revelation, it gives you a description. And the angel told John that the 10 horns will hate the whore, right? So it's not the coming of Christ here at the end of all that. It's absolutely how the man of sin begins to manifest his power to the Jewish nation and to godly people of that hour. Because it plainly tells you in Daniel, and he will wear out the saints of the Most High. That's not your bride saints back here. That's the saints in this period. Here's what will happen. When Satan is allowed to use the man of sin to kill, to butcher, to slaughter the foolish virgins and many Jewish saintly people, it's going to begin to make the European society, this is no good. So the political leaders, the 10 horns, are going to suddenly say, not before God allows them to, but the political leaders of Europe will begin to say, look, this does not cure one thing. Let's condemn this system of Catholicism and Protestantism, and we will establish a new form of political ideology that will have no religion, because it's time we throw off this nonsense. So, brothers and sisters, by the time they confiscate the Catholic properties of cathedrals, temples, close their bank accounts, they can't operate. Read Daniel 11th. And he will serve a God that his fathers knew not. You know and I know there is no other God. You'd have to be the devil. Right? And I want to say this morning. Let's wake up and realize what we've got in the White House. I've got stuff here to read to show you this is not the Antichrist that's put that thing up there. This is the devil to use this nation and strip it of everything of quality that it has. Because it goes to show, when it began to go into apostasy in the religious structure, then the devil could use it. He could blind the leaders and strip it of its wealth to rebuild his old kingdom. But at the same time, the devil will be allowed to use this man. And I have to say this morning, brothers and sisters, up to that hour, when that man of sin is sitting in Jerusalem in the temple, demanding the world, it's not the Orients giving him honor and prestige. No, it's only the people where the beast rules. You're never going to get the Chinese Oriental people to worship anything. How many understand me now? When the time is close, that's when God will let the 10 horns rise up and destroy that Catholic system, the spirit of it, and all of its material holdings. This will bring about an economic shaking within the European continent. The Pope will no longer hold to any kind of religion. But because his position, now then the devil can anoint him to fulfill in the final weeks one of the most diabolical, satanic takeover that there's ever been on the face of this planet Earth. What does it say in Daniel 11? And there shall come rumors out of the east, right? And the north. That's not Russia. That's Europe. That's got through now then destroying the Catholic religious system. She's ready to divert everything over to nothing but a political ideology and a materialistic kingdom. When you get Europe then going through a temporary shaking, it's known in history for centuries the Orients have always wanted to have a chance to try to override and to subdue and to conquer the West. What do you think but Genghis Khan, what do you think he was after? Back in the late part of the 12th century, leading into the 13th. Up until he reached the areas of Eastern Europe, he was doing pretty good. He had cut a swath out of the Orient into Russia and then starting downward into Eastern Europe. Had it not been for Charlemagne, that German general, God only knows, Genghis Khan might have been in Germany. But I read about it in history. As Charlemagne turned the tide against him, that vast horde of Oriental people, soldiers, on horseback, they stole every horse, they took cattle, because by doing this gave them the food and the meat they needed on the way. It told what cities they went through on their way back to eventually, in months to come, to reach their final places back in the Orient. They raped, they slaughtered, they beheaded, they stacked the heads up. Young people, I went to school, but I read all of this sitting home. And I did not have to pay no professor for this knowledge. It left some of those areas of small citizenry, and they still show the traits of Genghis Khan's soldiers there today. That's how that Jinjin of the Orient was established. There will be definitely, by the time this shaking takes place, within the destruction of the old Roman church system, the 10 horse now have to divert completely to a political ideology of materialism that the world is fast moving toward. When they do, the Orients by that time are going to look westward, and they're going to begin to say, with all their millions of men, and they're going to begin to say, if we ever hit this West, now is our time. Take it to Revelation 16. And God gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. Where's it at, Brother Jackson? It's in the land of Palestine. It's in an ancient valley called the Valley of Megiddo. It leads from the Haifa Sea, the city of Haifa, into that valley. That's also called the Valley of Jezreel, to the foothills of Mount Megiddo. And brothers and sisters, that's why it says in Revelation, the 16th chapter, and the Euphrates River was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east that starts taking place along in here. Might be prepared. And as time moves on towards the close, that's when, brothers and sisters, that's when that man of sin, sitting in Jerusalem, no, he's no longer the baby-kissing Pope now. He's an evil tyrant. He's drunk on power. He's got the devil in him and he knows it. That's why it says he will no longer recognize, serve, worship the God of his fathers. He will serve the God of force, materialism. And brothers and sisters, let's wake up. That's what the devil wants the whole world today to do. Let's go after this materialism. To do so, the devil has had to creep into our societies, into our young, we will say, cultures. Brainwash, liquidate, take everything of God out of the picture. When I hear that one of our famous colleges, her professors have been quoted from in years gone by, who have written books. Now, that college has stooped so low. Once a year, the students are allowed to go naked. Nudism. Is that Antichrist? No, it is Satanism. How many are listening to me? And when I hear politicians, modern educators, modern philosophers telling the young generation, what you need is a college education, and go to hell with it. Bar my language. Friday, I took my car into Big O at Cordon to get a couple of tires put on it. Sitting there watching the news on TV, I was listening. I heard something said. God help me. Help our young generation. I could see right there the spirit that now is the head of the political leadership of America. It is not the Antichrist spirit as we have thought it was one time, which it was, but it's changed completely to a demonic, satanic, sadistic spirit. It has every intention in the end game take out of you and rob you of the very even thought that there's a God. Young people, young boys, you hear a lot about Star Wars nowadays, don't you? When I was growing up, it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She never killed nobody. And the little dwarfs never hurt nobody. Right? The entertainment world is making riches, millions, of inventing the soldiers, the peoples of the future Star Wars era. They got heads like alligators. They got heads like bullfrogs. They got heads like pigs. That's demonism. Amen. Diabolicism. You know it. And Warner Brothers and all of these other entertainment, they're making killings. But stick around. We're going to show this world what a Star War is. For out of glory they're going to come riding white horses with flaming sabers and all the jets and all the laser beams and all the high technology. Christ and his bride will be the stars from heaven. What a war! And out of his mouth, and out of my mouth, out of your mouth, is going to be a sharp two-edged sword. It tells me that in the 3rd chapter of Revelations. To him that overcometh will I give power over the nations. Don't it? And he shall rule them with a rod of iron. What does it say also in Revelation 17? It says the 10 horns, after they destroyed the whore, which time don't take many weeks for it to reach that point. In return, they'll turn and hate him. Right? They'll make war against him that sits on the white horse. They just as well go out here and throw rocks at the moon. Because, brothers and sisters, it says, but the Lamb will overcome them. Why? Because he's got some saints with him. They're stars. Not Hollywood's, but heaven-sent stars. Actors invested with power. Invested with a decision and knowing exactly what to bring to an end and what to allow to escape. Excuse me. I don't mean to act like an arrogant, blinded idiot. But the letter that I got, that I made mention of, this is a woman journalist. Her name is Phyllis Shapley. I don't know much about her. But I know one thing. She put enough stuff in this list, brothers and sisters. She has really painted a picture of the man we've got. And I have to say, the man we've got is doing exactly what he's supposed to do. The sad part of it is, he has stripped every type of clothing off of the American nation. And he walks around dangling it. See what I've done. Who wants to stand against it? Politicians, Republicans and Democrats. They're nothing but a bunch of low-down rapists. Not in the physical sense, but in a spiritual, political sense. They've sold out to the dirty devil. In here, it tells by the author and the writer of the particular article, what kind of a man do we have up here? Is he a murderer? From Vince Foster? One after another. Never has there been a man in the White House that's done what he's done. Let me read something. I'm not going to get this thing done today. I'm just warming up the tubes by God's grace. This man has done what he should not have ever done. By Executive Order 13061, the American Heritage Rivers Initiative, Clinton purported to give himself the power to take over 10 rivers a year, later extended to 14, whose adjacent lands will be put under the control of Clinton-appointed river navigators. Listen to this, each with a salary of $100,000. Which means this, Kim, let's just say you're a rancher in one of these river valleys. You're grazing 8,000 head of cattle. If the New World Orders, when they begin to design the New World government, administration, every environmental thing has to be in place. They will decide where you will graze those cattle. If they determine that 1,000 acres of that is unsuitable for grazing, they can automatically claim it and turn it back over to federal lands. They may pay you for it, and again, they may not. If you owned all of that land and you wanted to deed 10 acres to your daughter or your son, they get married to have a house, they will come and tell you whether you can or you can't. There will be no more subdivisions. Everything will begin to be condominiums, just like in Singapore and Hong Kong. They'll stick you 30 stories up in a flat, and you looking down. How many of you young people want to live cooped up like that? That's your world of New World Order. But I'm so glad it's heading for a short duration. It's satanic oriented, and God won't even allow it. I'm not telling you that certain parts of it can't be set in motion. Certain parts of it would have to be to stir the people up, to make them mad enough to explode. You wonder how this man can get in office so slick and easy. Clinton's surprise grab of 1,700,000 million acres of Utah land for a national park in 1966 just happened to include $1 trillion worth of clean burning, low sulfur, hard coal. Clinton's removal of this huge natural resource from commercial availability tremendously enhanced the value of the world's second largest source of environmental safe coal, which just happens to be owned by Clinton's Indonesian friends, the Riddas, who gave millions of dollars to Clinton's presidential campaign in 1992 and 1996. That's how this man operates. It's not an antichrist, it's a God, it's a devil thing. He cares less what the Pope does. How many believe me? But he's going to turn America into a hellhole. That's his aim. That's his game. He's the man that's going to show the world what a future society of world globalists can be like in the 21st century. That's why I said yesterday in the wedding, marriage as we've known it will be taken off of the books. Why? Because the word infidelity will no longer be in the language. It will be a future designed by the devil. You live like you want to. Your lifestyle. You can live with that girl till she has a baby. then go live with another one for 2 or 3 years. That's how the future generations of people will be propagated on this planet. And they've also got this in mind. They will relocate areas of people that's overly populated and come and stick them by force where you didn't think they needed to be. You won't have a thing to say about it. And the purpose of it is so we can eventually do away with the black and the white and the brown and the yellow and the red. And we're all just one great big conglomeration of human beings mixed up. Brothers, the devil tried that in Genesis 6. Amen. Didn't he? But God looked down. And God was not well pleased with what he saw. Right? God says, I will not always tolerate, put up with what man's doing. I'll cut his lifespan shorter. And then he said, the devil has done this. I see one lone man. One lone man. His wife. And poor Richard Gann of Singapore. He still has to preach that Noah was a pure seed. Last of it. Brothers and sisters, Noah was just as mixed up as the rest. Any man or woman that's ever even went to school to know anything about the genealogy. If Noah, the elder son of Lamech, which was his father and his wife, was pure seed, would not Noah's brothers and sisters that was born after that be pure seed? Huh? Then why didn't he take a sister? Common sense would tell you men sure know how to really get things messed up. But what I've said to you this morning, I'm not mad, but I am absolutely aggravated by the devil to think that for the past 30 years we've seen a spirit come upon this American nation. And we've got professors that are as arrogant as the devil themselves. They propagate, they agitate, and they aggravate and instigate a pattern and a way of life that is in no wise found in the Word of God. The eventuality is to bring a world of human beings on the scene. They have no morals. Therefore, we can't fuss and point the finger. We don't want no marriage laws because therefore there's no law to break. Ain't that something? I tell you one thing, brothers and sisters, the devil sure does know how to pull the wool over people's eyes. Listen to this, what this man has done. I'm sure you all heard about when Mexico and Brazil was having some financial problems. For the Mexican and Brazilian bailouts, Clinton used executive authority to raid a U.S. Treasury Department fund set up in the 1930s for the specific purpose of being available to stabilize the U.S. dollar. The president certainly was not authorized to give this money to foreign governments, so they could not make their loan payments due to Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin's old firm, Goldman Sachs. Clinton took it. Give it away. All of that goes to show his eventual end game to be a man like Hitler. He says, Milovovich, or whatever his name was, he called him a Hitler. Well, he's no better himself. The method he went after is to try to prove. And I'm going to bring my points to a close this morning, brothers and sisters. Don't worry. The coming of Christ is coming soon. I'll be so glad. We're seeing this Spirit manifest itself. But with the coming of Christ, we're going to be the people that's going to bring the thing to an end. And it says in Zechariah, and there shall be light in the evening time. The sun's getting ready to go down on this age. But it's a little later in the day now than it was back when Brother Branham was alive that fulfilled that. The sun's going down. And by the time, brothers and sisters, mankind moves through this week, and all these things have been fulfilled. That's why it says there in Revelations 19, and the beast. Yes, it's still the European 10-horn system, but it's no longer got Catholicism sitting on its back, because the 10 horns done destroyed it. And the false prophet, yes, he was the Antichrist, but he's a devil now. He's the devil incarnate. Read what it says in Daniel. He serves the God of the gold and the silver and the material things of this world. That's Satanism. That's the only kind of valuables he cares about. And brothers and sisters, and the kings of the earth, that goes to show that by the time then Jesus is ready to split the heavens, as the week closes out, the coming of Christ in his descent from heaven, when the heavens open and all the beauties and the glories of the universe are seen invested in him. Imagine the kings of the earth, how they're going to look up. I can see why they would look with fear. I can see why kings would say, we'll make war against him. We don't want our 21st century interrupted. Our plan and our ideas are too great. We've got to resist this. But that's why, brothers and sisters, and out of his mouth went a sharp two-edged sword, that with it should smite the nations. And I want to say this, brothers and sisters, it's going to be worse than a shootout at OK Corral. Because there's none of that modernistic weaponry, high-tech innovation going to amount to a dime at the coming of Christ. That immortal body of saints sitting on white horses clothed in fine linen, and the king himself sitting on a white horse clothed in a purple robe that's stained and dipped in blood. He's coming to be King of kings and Lord of lords. And we're coming to be kings with him on the earth. And brothers and sisters, there's a conflict going to arise. It's not going to be over in 2 or 3 hours. That's why it has to read in Daniel 12 like it does. And we get a 75-day, I think, elapsed period of time. I have to say, brothers and sisters, God's going to let time elapse long enough, and the sun will rise and set, sunrise and set, sunrise and set, until that immortal army has destroyed, devastated, brought to an end every materialistic, destroyed every human being that has devised to think evil and contrary to him. No wonder then it says, and the dead bodies shall lie from one end of the earth to the other. And God will say to the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field, come and eat flesh till you be filled. Drink blood till you be drunk. For this is the supper of the great God. Yes, the sun's going down on man's human dynasty. It's his end. Man no more will ever be allowed to perpetuate a kingdom that has come to such a drastic end. Ready to take over the planet and remove the existence of God and his plan of salvation altogether. I hope I haven't confused you this morning, so if it has, write your questions. Because, brothers and sisters, we're coming back to rule and reign. And there's no need of you going home, well, I don't know whether I'm worthy or not. Stop such nonsense. If you never was 15 years ago and you're not now, then you never will be. Stop coming to Faith Assembly and taking up seat space. I'm not worthy. It's time, brothers and sisters, shake ourselves. You're the only people this book's even talking about. You. John D. Rockefeller ain't in the picture. When it says in Daniel, and the righteous shall understand. They're not coming out of Russia. And it's not the Jews right now either. It's got to be people like you. God's gave you and me an opportunity to know what's going on. Maybe I haven't used a calm enough voice, but I'll have to say, brothers and sisters, at least Clinton can't stand over me. And I got some more stuff in here I'll read tonight along with this. Man, I see a man that has so diabolically stepped into an office, and he's reached across the waters and took the free money. He has absolutely turned our atomic sources over to the Chinese. And it's a known fact. He can be gotten for treason. But brothers and sisters, let me ask you a question. Right now, we have a little soldier by the name of Private New that just a few short years back refused to wear the UN arm insignia and the UN colors. That dirty president wants to absolutely court-martial him, give him a dishonorable discharge, ruin his future. But the same man who wants to do that to a private has pulled treason and sold our military power to an enemy that's justifiable of a firing squad. And you know it. What I was aiming to say a while ago when I was sitting in the big old tower place, some woman talking about churches. Churches losing their tax status because they got to preaching against politics. And she was loudmouthed enough to not let whoever wrote the question answer, to say, well, churches ought to stay out of politics. I'd like to have that woman by the throat. Glenn. And roll time back long enough and put her in the front of all those boys that went ashore at Enzio. Normandy, Iwo Jima, Tarawa. What did they die for? Give that stinking thing some freedom. Well, what I'm talking about is Bible prophecy. And everything that's taking place political now is in Bible prophecy. We are people that's seeing it unfold day by day. Woman, go on, spread your gossip. Stick your chest out. Because one of these days you're going to meet the coming of Christ. And all of these so-called fanatics, sister, I'm one of them. I love him enough because he took out of my mind what I used to think. When I think of the thousands of men that has died for politicians in Washington for the past number of years while they play politics and sell our nation out. When they died for freedom, they sell it away. They died for freedom. They give the wealth away. They died for freedom. They give every other prestigious thing away. Well, come back again tonight. This is just a one-day thing. But we're going to take this thing and break it down during the convention. I want the people to be able to see what's going on. And the fact that I see this satanic spirit gripping society, gripping politicians for a last power hold, it lets me know we're moving Brother Allen right on schedule. Because this thing meets its end right there at the coming of Jesus Christ. God will never let this planet Earth go under the jurisdiction of a diabolic controlled world system with a Hitler or a Clinton at the head of it. Heavenly Father, I pray this morning, Lord, help us. Help us to know how to look at the tomorrow, the weeks to come, the days, whatever it is, whatever time remains, Lord. Lord, we're depending on you to take us, enlighten us, lead us. Use us, Lord, and help us to have the wisdom to know how to take what we have learned and how to relate to it. Heavenly Father, I love my brothers and sisters. Strengthen them. Encourage them. This we pray now in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.